Story 1. Dead Man's Rights. Mr. Katzen had been sitting up at the bar for some time. The lights and the music were both very low, casting a sort of malaise over the entire half-empty room. A group of men in the corner were watching a baseball game on the television on the wall. A few small groups of people murmured among themselves, the tables. Katzen had been staring into several glasses of bourbon for the past 2 hours, the room around him slowly fading into a dull blur of colors and sounds. The girl tending bar just replaced his glass when it ran dry, and the cycle continued. It was around midnight when the stranger approached him. Katzen turned to see a middle-aged man sitting in the stool to the left of him. The man seemed to be the only thing in the room not covered in the haze of inebriation. He didn't wave to the bartender, nor did the bartender seem to see him. He merely turned and looked directly into Katzen's eyes. The stranger was nondescript for the most part, except for the eyes. They were bright gold, shining in the dim light. Katzen had never seen anything quite like them. When the man talked, his voice was low and smooth, like a storm in the distance. "Hello, Mr. Katzen," said the man. "I'm Death." Katzen believed him. No amount of liquor led him to that belief. It was more of an instinct that a man should know death when it stood before him. "Pleasure to meet you," said Katzen, deciding that being polite was the correct option. "Can I buy you a round?" Death laughed. It was a fake laugh, although a very good one. It sounded like someone that has already heard every joke in the world 1,000 times, but is still trying to be Paul. I don't drink, I'm afraid," said Death. "I'm just here to tell you that you'll be throwing in the towel somewhat earlier than you would expect." "And why oh, I get the heads up?" asked Katzen. He grabbed several nuts out of a bowl in front of him. They had been the only things he'd eaten in half a day. Death leaned up onto the bar, folding his hands under his chin. Death sighed deeply, as if he didn't want to hear that question. "Because, Mr. Katzen," said Death, "I've begun doing contract work." "Successful guy like you?" asked Son. "Didn't think you'd need the extra cash." He looked over at Death, only to find the seat empty. He considered for the first time that he was merely hallucinating. Someone to his right coughed lightly. Katzen turned to find an old woman, and looking at him with the same pair of gold eyes. "I merely take a small something from the people that require my services," said the more elderly Death, "although I can't Hey, it's all for that. What do I need with a memory or a sliver of a man's soul after sticking to the script for millions of years? It's mainly about the thrill, and I enjoy the conversation." Death smiled. Having a mouthful of yellow dentures. "You still didn't really answer the question," said Katzen. Death stopped smiling quite so broadly. "Very perceptive for someone on their 6th drink," said Death, "which makes this all the more fun." Death disappeared from the seat. Katzen swung around to find an athletic-looking young man to his left. The gold eyes seemed to pierce him even deeper. "A question is an amazing thing, Mr. Katzen. The first thing a mortal does upon being born is wonder. Upon waking up, entering a room, meeting someone, or even looking up into the sky, the first thing you do is wonder. Immortals don't wonder, they know." The longing in Death's voice was half heartbreaking and half terrifying. "If you're going off the script, they don't know, do they?" asked Katzen. His head was beginning to clear as adrenaline and fear began to sweep away the haze. Death chuckled. "No, they don't," said Death, and that terrifies T.H. "And who's them? That's something I can't answer," said Death. "There are rules, you see. I can do this as long as everyone follows the rules. The rules you have to worry about say that dead men have certain rights. Most come by them naturally. But when I take a more active role, I'm required to tell you those rights. Hence my presence here." Death gestured back at the dark-ended, half-empty bar. "What rights do I have?" Death vanished again and reappeared as a young boy on the other side of Cadson. The and old eyes were much more disturbing on a 10-year-old face. "The first is the right of knowledge," said Death in a high-pitched voice. "All men are entitled to know the manner of their death prior to its occurrence." "You're saying everyone knows how they're going to die if anyone pays close enough attention to their life," said Death. "They'll know. Slow and painful or short and violent. They can all see it coming if they try. I've never seen anyone really try, though. You, though, Mr. Cadson, are going to die choking on one of those peanuts you've been eating." Cadson stopped his hand as he was about to put another nut into his mouth. He placed it back into the bowl and pushed it away. "That won't change anything, but if it makes you feel better, I suppose. And why do you have to tell me?" "Rules," said Death. "If someone isn't given full rights, shit happens." Cadson almost laughed hearing the kid version of Death say that, but stifled it. "Which brings us to your second right, the right of choice. There are many, many things that can happen after you die, and people always choose for themselves what happens to them. They don't even know they're doing it, but they do it." "And I get to choose?" asked Cadson. "Do I get to know what the choices are?" "Believe me, Mr. Cadson." The child disappeared. Cadson turned to see a beautiful woman to his left. In fact, she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. He hoped Death would stay that way for a while. "My job would be so much simpler if I could tell people the options. But don't worry, you'll choose before you die, which brings me to your last right, and the main reason I'm here, the right of experience." "I've got plenty of experience," said Cadson, taking another swig of bourbon. "Believe me." "But not enough," said Death. The woman's voice was light and sensual, with a hint of an unknown accent. Cadson tried to keep from looking at Death while it spoke. He worried that he might get distracted more. "Tal's experiences are why it knows its death and why it makes its choices. Without those experiences, the system falls apart. So I am here to impart knowledge to make up for what you're going to lose. We having a Q and a session now?" "Ask Cadson." "More or less," said Death. "Starting now, you will have for questions. I will have to tell you the complete truth about anything you ask, but there are certain things I can't talk about. If you ask about those, you forfeit one question." "And what are those?" asked Cadson. It took him less than a second to realize what he had done. He looked up into Death's eyes and saw a slight triumph there. "One question down," said Death. "Don't feel bad. They all do that. I had one man that used all four in about 10 seconds, so you're still ahead of the game. In any case, you can't ask about what happens after you die, anything that will happen in the future, or how to live forever. That's it." See, Cadson realized something that he hadn't up until this point. This was a game to Death, a game that it very thoroughly enjoyed. That was its payout. so I assume you'll be thinking more carefully about the next three. Death gave him a cold look that would have made any man fall in love. He realized exactly why it had waited until that point to take that form. But any alcohol in his system had been dissolved by pure fear at that point. These were perhaps his final chances to do anything with his pathetic life. "Who sent you to kill me?" asked Cadson, slowly and deliberately. "Death smell, Ed. Mr. Holland, your business partner," said Death. Cadson began to ask why, but slapped a hand over his mouth before the sound came out. Death laughed. "You know what?" it asked. "You caught that so well. I'm going to tell you why just for the hell of it. He found those certain files you didn't want him to. The ones about the offshore accounts and the shady practices. He was most interested in the files you were planning to frame and blackmail him with." Cadson stared down into his glass, but said nothing. "People don't actually hire me consciously. It's more a matter of mindset. How much they want someone dead and how much they're willing to sacrifice." Mr. Holland, for instance, can no longer remember 1991, the happiest year of his life. That's the year he got his master's degree, met his wife, and had the best steak he'd ever eaten. To you it may not seem like much, but trust me, if he knew, he would not have agreed. So what next? Sever. All thoughts went through Cadson's head at that moment. He wondered where his life went wrong. He wondered if there was any chance at all he was getting into any sort of heaven. He wondered if he really had known it was going to end this way. "I know this is important, Mr. Cadson, but I have places to be." There was a hint of impatience in Death's voice that made a single thought arise in Cadson's head. It was almost like Death was worried. Cadson thought about it a bit more, making sure his question was perfect and praying that he was right. Death stared in rapt attention as he opened his lips. "You have places to be. I have rights. Is that a question?" asked Death, a look of confusion appearing on its face. Hope surged into Cadson. "Not at all," he said. "If I done ask you the last question, and my rights are not fulfilled, that means you can't kill me early because shit happens, right?" Death cocked its head to the side, a calculating expression on its face. Its golden eyes stared right through Cadson as it sat there in thought. Finally, a wide grin spread over Death's face. It let out the lightest, most wonderful laugh that Cadson had ever heard. "That is correct, R. Cadson," said Death, leaning in close. "But have you weighed the possibilities you may be scheduled to die tomorrow? Isn't there some answer you would be willing to give up one day for? Can you live knowing that you traded away the chance?" Death paused a moment. "And won't Mr. Holland be very much trouble for you shortly?" "I'll deal with it," said Cadson. He turned away from Death and went back to sipping his bourbon. "Good night, miss." Death sighed and got up from the bar stool. It laid one hand on Cadson's shoulder and lowered its lips to his ear, despite Cadson's suspicion that no one else could hear it. "Not many have made it this far into the game, Mr. Cadson. Congratulations. But I want you to know that I always get my man. I've gotten every one of them in human history, in fact. I'll see you soon." Death smiled once more and walked towards the door. As Cadson watched from the corner of his eye, the figure disappeared halfway across the room. He made a silent toast and drained the remainder of his glass. As he slammed it back onto the bar top, the bartender walked over to him. "Can I get another bourbon?" asked Cadson. The bartender looked at his watch. "I think you've got time for one more," said the bartender. While the bartender poured the drink, Cadson looked back at the room and wondered if the people knew what had just happened. If it had, in fact, happened, the bartender put the drink down in front of him on the house. "In fact," he said with a smile before walking away. "Thank you," muttered Cadson, his mind else. As he took the first sip of his drink, he absent-mindedly reached for the bowl of nuts. Story 2, Gateway of the Mind. In 1983, a team of deeply biased scientists conducted a radical experiment in an undisclosed facility. The scientists had theorized that a human without access to any senses or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to perceive the presence of God. They believed that the five senses clouded our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human could actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer to purge him of all his senses. The scientists performed a complex operation in which every sensory nerve connection to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. With no possible way to communicate with or even sense the outside world, he was alone with his thoughts. Scientists monitored him as he spoke aloud about his state of mind in jumbled, slurred sentences that he couldn't even hear. For days, the man claimed to be hearing hushed, unintelligible voices in his head. Assuming it was an onset of psychosis, the scientists paid little attention to the man's concerns. 2 days later, the man cried that he could hear his dead wife speaking with him, and, even more, he could communicate back. The scientists were intrigued, but were not convinced until the subject started naming dead relatives of the scientists. He repeated personal information to the scientists that only their dead spouses and parents would have known. At this point, a sizable portion of scientists left the study. After a week of conversing with the deceased, through his thoughts the subject became distressed, saying the voices were overwhelming, and every waking moment his consciousness was bombarded by hundreds of voices that refused to leave him alone. He frequently threw himself against the wall, trying to elicit a pain response. He begged the scientists for sedatives so he could escape the voices by sleeping. This tactic worked for 3 days until he started having severe night terrors. The subject repeatedly said that he could see and hear the deceased in his dreams. Only a day later, the subject began to scream and claw at his non-functional eyes, hoping to sense something in the physical world. The hysterical subject now said the voices of the dead were deafening and hostile, speaking of hell and the end of the world at any point. He yelled, "No heaven, no forgiveness" for 5 hours straight. He continually begged to be killed, but the scientists were convinced that he was close to establishing contact with God. After another day, the subject could no longer form coherent sentences. Seemingly mad, he started to bite off chunks of flesh from his arm. The scientists rushed into the test chamber and restrained him to a table so he could not kill himself. After a few hours of being tied down, the subject halted his struggling and screaming. He stared blankly at the ceiling as teardrops silently streaked across his face. For 2 weeks, the subject had to be manually rehydrated due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head and, despite his blindness, made focused eye contact with the scientist for the first time in the study. He whispered, "I have spoken with God, and he has abandoned us," and his vital signs stopped. There was no apparent cause of death. Story 3. I never should have cured my tinnitus, a nightmare of a disease affecting millions of people, myself included. How could I best describe this condition? An incessant nail on a chalkboard, screeching that goes on for every minute of every day. Just imagine never experiencing the true bliss of utter silence. Maybe it's not too uncommon to hear a vague ringing, especially for people like me who had grown up to become an obnoxious teenager with no regard for volume control. Understandably, my parents were not happy about my blasting loud music at all hours. But what kind of teenage rebel would I have been if I listened to my parents? Ultimately, my punishment would be given years later when I started hearing a faint ringing. At first it was a rare occurrence, but at present day I can't even fall asleep without the aid of a loud white noise-producing machine. Even then, my quality of rest is debatable at best. During the early days I was willing to try anything to stop the godforsaken noise, rainstorms while sleeping, earwax removal, even a small dose of antidepressants. Nothing worked. You'd be amazed how many help groups you can find online, forums for anything, veterans with PTSD, how to cope with losing a pet, or in my case, how to deal with tinnitus. I'd looked over the top suggestions on several occasions. Most I had already tried while visiting my doctor, while the rest were mostly scams, better suited for multi-level marketing campaigns. I used to call myself an optimist, so naturally I would RN to the form every other week in hopes of finding a miracle cure. On one particular day I decided to scroll a bit further down and see the less popular suggestions. Among the obvious troll posts and scam cures I found a more clickbaity post that read, "A weird trick to cure tinnitus. Nothing more, nothing less." I sighed and started reading, preparing myself to be disappointed. Yet again, still, the instructions were simple enough. Place your palms over your ears and direct your fingers to the back of your head. Put your index fingers on top of your middle fingers and try to snap them like a drum. Repeat 50 to 100 times. There were no comments below, as the post was relatively new. Worst case, I would look stupid sitting there by myself and drumming the back of my head. So I tried it out, snapping my fingers and causing a little drumming sensation. 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. That ought to do it. I removed my palms from my ears and listened intently. Nothing. For the first time in years there was just the pure bliss of silence. For minutes I just sat back in awe, not believing what I was hearing, or more accurately, not hearing. Had the trick actually worked, I decided that, rather than enjoying my newfound silence, I would give my brain a well-deserved silent rest. And that's exactly what I did. I slept like a baby that night until around 2 in the morning. I tend to wake up randomly during the night, so it caused little concern. To my disappointment, but not surprise, the screeching had returned. At best, I had half expected the illusion to be a temporary one. I simply performed the witchcraft-like trick again, and once more the ringing was gone without a trace. With a sigh of relief, I settled back into bed. The sound that had haunted me for so long had been easily defeated by a helpful anonymous person online, and I was content. Only then did I realize that I wasn't enveloped in complete silence. Rather, there Washington, as something else cowering in the dark, only making its presence known by a soft thump. Could it be my own heartbeat? After all these years, would I now be haunted by a new sound? I held 3 fingers on my neck and felt a pulse. It didn't match the cupboard in my apartment. Checked in the hallways and, lastly, placed my ear against the wall. No sooner did my ear touch the wall before the sound stopped. My heart raced alongside my logical mind. There had to be a simple explanation. Maybe it was been a busted pipe, or one of my neighbors being a prick late at night. No matter the cause, it was time for bed. In the morning the ringing returned. I figured I could put the noise at bay by performing the trick every 6 hours. It quickly became a routine of mine to stupidly tap my head when no one was looking, and it worked. Everything was great, apart from my nightly routine of waking up around 2 and hearing the same thumping, softly keeping me company in the darkness. Most nights I simply ignored it, but other nights curiosity got the better of me, and I pursued the sound. Each night I once again failed to locate the sound. I simply couldn't place it, and I couldn't be bothered to stay up long enough to figure out when it started and when it ended. I tried to talk my neighbors into investigation, but they scoffed at the idea of waking at such late hours. Rats were another possibility, but after a quick visit by pest control, they assured me there were no rodents living within the walls. In fact, after looking at the building plan, yes, they insisted that it would be impossible for rats to live inside these walls. As a last resort, I decided I would record myself sleeping. I'd heard there were a bunch of apps that only record you if there's a noise, so I figure it would be ideal for the situation. I downloaded a free app and went to bed. Just like every night before, I woke up around 2 a.m., but decided I would ignore the sound and let my phone do its work. I had some earplugs that came in handy, and without further troubles I fell asleep. After waking up the following morning, I brewed myself a much-needed cup of coffee and sat down, figuring I could run the recording through audio editing software to look at the amplitude of the sound waves rather than listening through it all. He thumps started around midnight and kept going for several hours. Aside from that, I mostly found sounds of myself shifting around in bed. However, at 3:30 a.m. there was a short pause consisting of complete silence, as if every sound had been erased from existence. It was not more than a minute before the sound returned, but it was no longer a soft thumping. It sounded more like whispering, just incomprehensible voices talking to no one in particular, raspy and tired. I couldn't make out what was said on the recording. My phone wasn't exactly a technological wonder. In fact, I had no interest in finding out. If anything, I would have preferred to leave the apartment and forget about the whole thing, but being a poor student without any nearby family, I had no other option than to stay put. Besides, I still thought there might be a logical explanation. After some hesitation, I came to the ridiculous conclusion that if I could hear the actual whispering, I could probably locate the culprits. So when night came, I went to bed, fully expecting to be awoken at the usual time, and from then I would search for the source of the noise. 2 a.m. rolled around, and I was awoken by the familiar, eerie thumping, where it had once been a welcome, intriguing part of my nightly routine. It had now become a dreaded enemy. It was relentless and OT, stopping for a single second, and as before, I had trouble identifying the exact location it was emanating from. Like an auditory illusion, it seemed to echo throughout the room, coming from Eve, everywhere and nowhere all at once. At precisely 3:31, the sound abruptly came to a halt. I held my breath in anticipation, waiting for the mysterious voice to start talking. As expected, the whispers began. Unlike the thumps, however, I could immediately discern their origin. They came from the wall directly behind my bed. I knew there couldn't possibly exist anything behind the wall. No apartment nor crawl space, just a concrete barrier separating my room from the outdoors. I crawled onto my bed with caution, as if approaching a wild animal, and carefully rest my ear to the wall. The whispers started to become more focused, morphing into a single understandable phrase. "We know you can finally hear us." It sounded like several broken voices merged into a singular entity. I jolted back on my bed, where I remained frozen in fear. "Thank you for letting us in," the voices continued before falling silent. I began to feel faint, and it took me a while to realize I hadn't been breathing for quite some time. I forced a gasp, bringing air into my lungs, and tried desperately to calm down. While trying to come up with a plan, the humping returned, only this time I heard exactly where it came from. The soft steps turned into loud tearing along the inside of the wall. It moved with each step, working its way towards the hallway. All outside my bedroom, I could vaguely make out a shadow beneath the door as it moved past it. I always keep my bedroom door locked, a habit formed during my time spent living with intruding family members, but I knew that wouldn't stop whatever abomination I had let loose simply by acknowledging its presence. The creature started knocking on the door, a playful thump with each knock, one I had become accustomed to over the past few weeks. It spoke to me with its now familiar, broken voice. "It's too late to lock us out now," they said. "What do you want?" I stuttered back. What are you?" "We are the acolytes. We just wanted to be heard. We've waited so long." It struck the door, and small cracks appeared around the hinges. "We have always been here," the voices cried in unison. "Why are you afraid?" Another violent punch, and the upper hinge broke off the door frame. I would have called the police, or anyone for that matter, but had inconveniently left my phone in my jacket pocket, so I threw on whatever clothes I had lying on the floor and clambered out the window and down the fire escape. I wasn't taking any chance with whatever was on the opposite side of my door. As I made my descent, I heard my bedroom door splinter. "Where are you?" the things yelled. "We have come for you." I never looked back after my escape. I made my way to a nearby gas station and used their phone to dial the police. I told them, without going into specifics, that there had been an intruder in my apartment, and explained how I had fled down the fire escape. When they checked the apartment, however, there was no one to be found. The door to my bedroom was shattered, but there were no other signs of forced entry and no indication that anything else had been damaged or stolen. To make matters worse, my apartment's overall state of disrepair made it difficult for the police to accept my story at face value. They had to break down the front door to get in, and I knew my landlord would be pissed, but I didn't care about that. After a very brief investigation, which involved checking security camera footage to confirm that no one could possibly have entered my apartment, I was let off with a warning not to prank call the police again. Another cop offered me the number for a local psychiatric facility. While the police were there, I grabbed a bag and filled it with the bare essentials. I left that night to return home to my parents, intending to spend the rest of the night at the train station. I'm never returning to that place. I've called my landlord and explained that they can keep my deposit, along with whatever stuff I left behind. A few days passed off, or I left the apartment behind. Before long, my tinnitus returned, louder than ever, and at first I couldn't have been happier about it. By allowing myself to hear the entities, I had inadvertently let them in. I accepted my condition as a bittersweet blessing, as it hid the things that go thump in the night. And if I couldn't hear them, they couldn't find me either. Unfortunately, my relief proved to be short-lived. As it turned out, the ringing was no longer enough to silence the voices. Last night I woke up to a strange sound at 3:31 a.m. We found you. Story 4. I drove out to the desert. I was driving out to the desert, the panorama of distant rock, endless sand, and occasional cactus slowly blurring in my peripheral vision. Sparse cloud cover traversed the sky overhead, providing brief interludes of shade over deceptively large patches of the arid wasteland. I found my exit, an unremarkable dirt path most motorists would overlook. It led seemingly to nowhere, out into the emptiness devoid of civilization. To those in the know, however, it was a familiar avenue. The indicators were clear to me as I passed them. First the wooden signs, with crude pictures of mountains carved on them, then an outcropping of small boulders, with a giant arrow pointing east painted onto it. I turned my four-wheel drive on and took a sharp left past my silent navigators. As I penetrated deeper into the wilderness, my radio began to cut out, its signal fading to static. In my trunk were the necessities: water, rope, carabiner hooks, LK, and harness. I had everything I needed to make it up the sheer rock face. After about 10 miles, I arrived at the base of the towering mesa. It loomed over me and the surrounding terrain at almost 3,000 feet high. It dominated most of the adjacent landscape, its beckoning cliffs and peaks threatening to swallow everything that approached. Even the clouds struggled to graze the roof of my imposing adversary. All that remained was to locate the starting point of the climbing route. Hundreds, maybe thousands of climbers before me had attempted to conquer Black Mountain. Some were victorious. Most gave it an admirable effort. It wasn't the most difficult climb in the world, but the heat made for a formidable obstacle. Lucky for me, clouds were gathering above us, heading precious shade. As I inched closer to the base of the mesa, I spotted the stone circle and stopped my car, stepping out into the elements from my air-conditioned haven. A slight breeze carried the dry, stale air over me as I walked to the trunk and equipped my physical burdens. With a loud clank, I closed the hatch and ensured my car was locked properly. It was unlikely I would be robbed out each air, but safety is key in the desert. As my feet shuffled to the small stone circle, the clinking of my gear echoed slightly against the rock face, reflecting the emptiness of my situation. I'm glad no one's here, I thought to myself. I peered down the circle of rocks, taking in their fake petroglyphs left by previous climbers, written in chalk, paint, or who knows what. Some left them as a simple guide post to the start of the climb, others as I was here type of graffiti. This sort of childish obsession never interested me, but it was interesting to see what images were left. There were even some new ones I hadn't noticed before. Maybe this route was getting more popular than I expected. Moving on from the New Age vandalism, I proceeded to the cliff face. In front of me was a large crag, ideal for shimmying up with just my hands. It was a kind start to the climb, and I had a long way to go. For the first leg I hadn't needed any clips to secure my fall, my hands finding the holds from muscle memory. Eventually, however, after a brief rest on a small cliff, the real climb began. Most beginners stopped here, calling it quits and discarding a necessary gear. It was frowned upon by most of the community, but there wasn't much you could do to stop it. I felt a strange pang of anger and resentment against whomever littered this place. This example of nature's terrible cataclysm was something to be shared and respected, not used as a dumping ground. Up here, far above the cities and streets, the people and traffic, the work and responsibilities, I gazed out to the horizon. Up here, away from all the business of my mother's estate, I sought peace. Up here, I wouldn't have to deal with the fallout from breaking up with Joel, no friends to harangue or comfort me, just the wild air sweeping across the desert, and some asshole had to ruin it with their garbage. Fuck it, I said in my head. Fuck you. I screamed to the vast expanse before me. Clouds covered the mesa again, as if cooling me and my temper, the wind cooing against my face. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. Washington S. Suddenly startled by a sharp noise behind me. I quickly turned around to see small rocks falling from above the next leg of the climb. I quickly scanned the area for signs of life or worse, disintegration. I've known climbers to be attacked by mountain goats, coyotes, stray beehives, even mountain lions, but the number one killer is unstable rock formations. Time wears away at everything, even the monolith I was perched upon. One loose hold and you plummet to your death with little to no warning. Determined to conquer the route, I pressed on. I'm not going to die like that, I promised. In my head I saw no trace of animal life nearby, so I pressed on. The climb was slow compared to my start. Fewer obvious places for me to make a safe grip meant for more clips to be driven into the rock face. Thankfully, there were well-established directions evidenced from previous climbers. After an hour of strenuous ascending, I could tell I was reaching the next flat portion and rest stop. My hands, calloused and chalky, dug into the harsh rock, and with my weakening strength I lifted myself ever upward. Finally, as the sun began to creepy back out from the clouds, I found the cliff edge. Then I found bones bleached from the sun, but in sickly arrangement. A grotesque mixture of human and animal skeletons were splayed out in front of me. Bile began to rise in my throat, determined to refrain from further dehydrating myself. I held the vomit down. I'm no forensic technician, but I could identify human, lion, and coyote skulls. Sinew still hung from some of the bones. Nearby tracks indicated it was all dragged from some other location on the mesa. Whatever did this had killed recently and had gathered it all toge through in a macabre spectacle, a trophy to its ability, a warning to the world. I looked up the trail to the next ascent, the last leg of the climb until my journey was over. I looked to the left to an old goat trail that curves along the face of the mesa where the dirt tracks had come from. For anyone finishing the climb, it was a simple descent back the way you came to get back down. It was impossible to climb 3,000 feet and make it back down in time to return home the same day. This may be my last time, but I can make sure others don't perish here in the future. I decided. I downed more water, held a moment of silence for the slaughtered, and began traveling along the goat path. Mountain goats can walk incredible edges. We humans have to make do with shuffling sea, carefully and placing fail-safe so we don't fall to our deaths. I did what any experienced tracker would do. I followed the signs of life. To my dismay, they were mostly omens of death. More bones discarded here or there, droppings, tufts of fur and horn, teeth from human and beast alike. I made my way horizontally across the mesa for a grueling amount of time, until suddenly my hand met with to little friction. The fingers slipped abruptly from the hold, hanging uselessly on my side and bringing my body swinging. All at once an entire half of my body was dangling in the hot air, my view forced to gaze at the treacherous depths below. Dust, dirt, and rocks fell before me in a slow tumble, bouncing and shattering off the cliffs. I had trained for this and reminded myself, this is not how I die. Gaining my second wind, I swung back to face the wall and found a stronger hold. I glanced at my hand, finding a black substance coating my fingers, resolve to make it. To arrest, stop, and study the peculiar pigment. I continued on. Within 15 minutes, I had found what I was searching for. A short drop into a flat patch of rock would be my salvation. I steadied myself again, slowly and carefully moving into position to properly descend. First I set my legs, pointing my heels back to the wide world. I set my right hand in a good crag. Finally, I curled my left hand onto a hold. I counted down in my head and swung slightly out with each number. 3, 2, 1. My hand slips again. The fall is quick and the injury quicker. My right ankle meets the ground at an unsafe angle, twisting and fracturing, breaking the bones and cutting deep into my body. I gasped for the air that had been forced to my lungs from the impact. Grabbing for my wounded foot, I feel a substance on my hand. At my fury I see more black substance. Furious I scream in frustration and pain. The scream echoes into the nearby cave. A cave, the goats, it's here. My mind races as I peer over at the foreboding cave leading into the bowels of the mesa. I quickly take out what little I brought with me. I wash off the blood, bandage up what I can with the basic CL embers tape I had, and begin limping towards the cavern. My flashlight provides a scant amount of light, but it illuminates at least one mystery. Coal, the black substance is coal. Native Americans used coal centuries ago. Mining operations almost began here, but they were shut down as being environmentally unstable. I limped further in the body of the mesa, my grunts and footsteps echoing in to the otherwise silent tunnel. As I progressed, I began to make out drawings in a larger chamber where the outside light had completely faded. I was alone with the glyphs of someone unknown, ENTITY. Harsh black outlines in coal were everywhere. On every surface save the ground were depictions of animals, humans, monsters, of disgusting scenes of violence and murder. I began to tremble. What have I found? What could do this and not get caught? I began to feel faint and sat down. I expected to meet with more horrible skeletal remains, but felt only the cool rock on my skin. Whatever lived here was long gone. There was no fire pit, no remains, no droppings, nothing. My vision began to blur. I was bleeding from my wound profusely. The tape was meant to bandage hands, not Hick's broken bones. I reminded myself why I had come up here. I recalled why I packed so little. I never wanted to come back down. Was it the mesa scolding me, chiding me for planning to end my life on its sacred person? I doubt it cared. Nothing in life seemed to care anymore. After drinking the last of my water, I threw the canteen to the darkness ahead. It clanged and made a cacophonous sound reverberate off the hard walls of my makeshift tomb. Resigning myself to fate, I thought on my departed mother, my friends, family, co-workers, even Joel. Fuck me, I guess. I stated to the cave. I slumped further down the wall. Feeling the pain numb from lack of blood, I closed my eyes and waited for the end. Seconds later, I jolted awake from the sound of the clangy of my canteen. Accompanying it was the howl or growl of some unseen force. I was too weak to grab my flashlight, too weak to cry out. I whimpered ever so softly, straining to see and pitch-black darkness. I heard it draw closer, cold air sweeping over my body. Oh, how I wish I was out in the sun again. Otherworldly footsteps echoed in the chamber, gathering speed as it in distance on my hapless body. As I felt it stand above me, it roared in what sounded like three voices at once. It grabbed my injured ankle, once numbed, pain resurfacing and tearing through my body. I sobbed with what little strength I had left as it started dragging me towards the outside. As the last vestiges of adrenaline faded from my system, I began to drift off once more, each pain less than the last. My dying thoughts filled with regret and remorse as my assailant ferried me to the horrible death pit, where it left the other pitiful skeletons. I knew I would die before I saw light again. As I left from this world, I could only muster, I didn't want to die this way. Story 5. Evil Within the Institution. The following is a brief report outlining the tragic events that transpired in Western Toronto on the evening of Tuesday, June 13, 2017. Court proceedings are quietly underway, and much of the public view has been diverted in a direction I feel doesn't properly represent what truly took place that night. Whether all the details will eventually be made clear and available to the public, or worse yet, the jury, I cannot say. I will do my best to carry out what I perceive to be the correct course of action. I will compose what is, in my opinion, a factual and unbiased transcription of what actually happened. The information will be drawn from endless hours of study of case reports and personal interviews. My only request is that you do everything within your power to leave your personal bias and preconceived notions out of this. Please, D. Don't turn on the TV or scour the internet looking for what will be ultimately falsified news reports. Read the information I will leave for you here. Form your own opinion, then proceed how you see fit. Part 1. The location, Pine Grove Rehabilitation Center, known by many of the locals as the institution. The center served as a halfway house, homeless shelter, and drug addiction service of sorts. The three-story building was approximately 15,000 square feet in size and housed 37 patients. Residents on its last day of operation. It was built in a residential neighborhood on a large corner lot with a sprawling lawn, similar in size to a football field, separating it from the street. It was, by all accounts, a welcome member of the community. No history of problems or conflict with the local population. It was considered to be a model of operational efficiency and human rehabilitation success until the night of June 13, 2017. Part 2. The major players involved. Katie Harris, the 24-year-old rehabilitation nurse who would make the initial phone call and spur the police into action. At evening, she had been working at the institution for 2 years after graduating with an honors nursing degree from Queen's University. She was one of the staff members working the overnight shift that evening till LeBlanc, the police chief in charge of the western part of the city. He had recently been under scrutiny. Mumblings of him stepping down were already being whispered about after serious corruption within the organization was uncovered during his tenure. His career and reputation were at risk, and his health issues and stress problems were already well documented. He was the one responsible for making the difficult decisions on scene. Nearly all the major moves could in some way be sourced back to him. Part 3. The phone call. This recording was leaked to me by someone close to the defense. This is a written transcription of exactly what was said between Toronto dispatcher Lindsay Matthews and a distraught-sounding Katie Harris at 9:51 p.m. Dispatch. Hello, this is 9-1-1. What is your emergency, Harris? Please help. I need all the policemen you have in the city to come to the Pine Grove Rehabilitation Center right now. Dispatch. Miss, please try and remain calm. What is your name and current address? Harris. Fuck. We don't have time for this. I'm Katie Harris, and I'm at the institution. 3,350 for Cowherd Avenue. Dispatch. I understand. See, and you please tell me what's wrong, Harris. Something is inside the building. I have no idea what it is or where it came from, but it's attacking the residents. Dear God, save us. Dispatch. Miss Harry S. I'm sending some officers on patrol close to your area. Just hang on. Can you tell me any specifics on what you've seen? Loud screaming in the background. Harris. We don't need a few officers. We need every officer in the city, and we need them now. I don't even know how to describe it. It's long and black. It's radiating heat, and as these piercing yellow eyes, its aura, devoured a few of the residents. The halls are filling up with smoke. Dispatch. Miss, I need you try and remain calm. I'm having problems hearing you. Officers are on the way now. Harris. Please hurry. Oh dear G. The phone was disconnected from Harris and at 9:53 p.m. Part 4. Events on the scene. Below is the most accurate depiction of the events that I've been able to acquire. I put in the exact or rough time of each occurrence to try and best represent how the sequence truly unfolded. 10:01 p.m. Upon being detailed of the above phone call, Police Chief Tyler LeBlanc issues a maximum alert, and all on-duty officers are called to the scene. To SWAT teams comprised of 12 officers each are deployed. LeBlanc and other members of the senior and administrative staff head to the scene as WL 10:27 p.m. All lights are off in the building. Faint smoke has been rising from some of the windows on the right side. No significant changes have taken place since police personnel arrived. On scene, all officers have weapons drawn and are on high alert on the street in front of the property. Spotlights are set up, but are not adequately illuminating the building given how far it's built on the property. Homes in the immediate surrounding have been evacuated. LeBlanc and other high-ranking officials stand behind one of the SWAT trucks. He is on the radio with the station trying to see if they can get more information or connect with Katie Harris again before ordering a raid of the building. 10:28 p.m. Lights turn on in the front hall of the second story. This is the first documented change in action or circumstance. From the inside, officers tense up and await orders to charge, possibly even open fire. What seems to be a long, black snake-like shape move from one end of the building to the other. Heavy black smoke starts to rise out of the open windows after it has passed. The lights flicker briefly and then go out altogether. 10:29 p.m. An irate and deeply distressed LeBlanc starts begging and pleading for the station to try and connect him with Harris one last time. This time the connection is successful and LeBlanc manages to follow. Wing, short exchange with her. LeBlanc: is this Katie Harris? Harris: yes. Who is this? Someone with the authority to actually do something. LeBlanc: this is the chief of police. I need you to tell me what's exactly going on in there. Young lady, I have practically the whole city's police force waiting out here. Harris: oh, thank God, a few of us have locked ourselves in the basement. It knows we're in here. It's slithering up and down the hall. It's only a matter of time before it breaks in and starts doing what it's done to everybody else. LeBlanc: what exactly is it? I can't go barking orders when I don't even know what I'm dealing with. Harris: her voice becomes noticeably calmer on the recording here. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I know how bizarre what I'm about to say sounds. You need to do everything within your power to make sure whatever the hell got in here never gets out. It's killed a lot of innocent people tonight, and it's only hunting for more. The rest of us won't last much longer anyways, so whatever course of action you take, make sure you bring a lot of force. There is an evil inside this place which can never see the outside world. LeBlanc: Ms. Harris, what in God's name are you talking about? Harris screams away from the phone. Harris: it's getting hot again. Please do something. An explosion goes off somewhere near the rear of the building. Harris' phone cuts out at the same time. 10:31 p.m. LeBlanc and other senior members are finalizing tactical plans to storm the building. Helicopters and additional support are being summoned to the area. Before any plan is carried out, the front doors of the institution burst wide open. Everyone I've talked to says that a communal sense of panic and paralyzing terror engulfs the policeman waiting on the street. Something emerges in the open doorway. It's tough to tell exactly what it is. The spotlights still aren't revealing enough to see properly. What appears to be two yellow dots appear and glow in the darkness. Their movement is slight. They creep forward a tiny bit and then retreat, almost as if whatever is there is pondering. Its next move, LeBlanc calls the order for all personnel to raise and ready their weapons. Almost immediately after, another explosion goes off in a cluster of trees to the side of the prop. This the documented breaking point for the terrified LeBlanc, who calls the order to open fire. A hailstorm of rounds is unleashed at the building entrance. Pieces of brick go flying off. Nearby windows shatter, and both doors are blown completely off their hinges. Quickly, the yellow spots disappear from view. The shooting goes on for approximately 45 seconds before LeBlanc takes the order to stop. 10:33 p.m. The original plan of storming the building set into motion with slight variation. Officers are instructed to open fire in any situation they remotely suspect dangerous, regardless if civilians are in the vicinity. The largest team heads for the front door. Many of the officers later admitted they were terrified and questioning He ordered to advance. Upon entry through the front entrance, they discover the mass carnage. Not at all what anyone was expecting to find. 10:34 p.m. The call for all available ambulances in the area is made after discovery that most of the institution's patients, along with the other nurse on duty in the front hallway, LeBlanc changes the primary objective to civilian rescue. Yon had been gagged and bound after being heavily sedated according to later autopsies, and lined up against the back wall of the front lobby. There was no sign of trauma or injuries before they hit by the barrage of police bullets. Every one of them would later be pronounced dead on scene. 10:36 p.m. A police unit searching the basement finds the only person left inside the building, Katie Harris. She's smoking casually on an old wooden stool in a recreation area. She's wordless and puts up no resistance to being taken away by the officers and brought for station. She was entirely unharmed. Part 4. Evidence found in the ensuing investigation. Most notable findings in the ensuing investigation are as follows. Internet searches on how to make homemade explosives, along with items purchased both online and in store for the bomb construction by Katie Harris. Medium-length black curtains tied to a stretcher like a long, cylinder-like flag that were found on the second floor. Smoke machines purchased by Katie Harris and left under the second floor windows. 2 yellow and battery-powered neon lights taped to a piece of Bristol board were shattered by police bullets and found on the floor of the lobby. It's believed they were simply hanging from the top of the doorframe and swaying gently in the wind. Part 5. Conclusions. I hope the above has come off as unbiased as I intended. It is my sincerest hope that you will take the information, along with whatever else you're able to uncover, and form an educated opinion of what really happened. I just want to pose a few questions here to conclude. Is the blame for the massacre entirely on LeBlanc's shoulders? The man was desperate and was in a situation that no training could have ever prepared him for. Everyone else on the scene notes being terrified as well. All other senior members confess to being on board with opening fire. What was going through his head that night? What did he think he saw in the building and in the open doorway? Had he simply been the victim of Katie Harris' manipulation? What was Katie Harris' motivation? This will always be the one that bothers me the most. If her intention was simply to murder her co-worker and all residents of the institution that night, then why didn't she do it quickly and with ease while everyone slept? She was able to apprehend them easily enough and line them up in the lobby. Why not just finish the job herself? Trying to get police to open fire only limited her chances of success. More importantly, why did it have to be the cops who did it? Why the need for such a show? I can't say what goes on inside this woman's head. I've never spoken to her directly. I've only seen her on the stand and sitting beside her court-appointed lawyer. When I look at her, I see a woman who feels no remorse. Story 6. The Ouija Fire. Let me start this out by saying I am a very rational person, and I believe there is always a rational explanation for almost everything that happens. Now, with that being said, let me tell you a story about an experience I have had in the past I would not exactly call rational, but more of a paranormal experience. This all happened around the time I was 9, maybe 10 years old. I know that seems like it was a long time ago, but things like this you can used to forget. It was late November, early December. Snow was just starting to fall and it was starting to get cold. It was around 9 p.m. and I had two of my closest friends staying overnight at my home. Planning to play PlayStation and other things 10-year-olds do. For privacy reasons, I'm gonna call them Jack and Sam, and I have known each of them since around the 2nd grade. Sam was more of a risk-taker than Jack and liked to try unusual and new things. Jack was more of a play it safe and stick to the normal kind of kid. Now that we kind of have a background of everyone, let's get back to the story. It was around 9 p.m. and we had just set up the PlayStation and had the new Madden football game at the time set up and ready to play. We also had snack and Mountain Dew and the necessities to pull an all-nighter at that age. After a couple hours of playing games and horsing around, Sam goes to my room to get something from his bag he had brought over with clothes and etc. in it. After a few minutes, he came back out to the living room where we were set up and asked us if we wanted to try something new and fun. As he said this, he slowly brought out an Ouija board from behind his back with a huge mischievous smile spreading across his face. I, being only 10 at the time, was curious about the board as I had heard about it, but never actually seen one. Jack, being Jack of course, he said no and kept telling Sam to put it back where he had gotten it from. After a bit of coercing and begging, Sam and I got Jack to finally play with the board with us. We got it all set up and looked at a slip of paper that was sitting with the board. In the box, the paper was labeled "Caution. Ouija boards are not toys. Proceed with caution." Under this was a list of rules on what to do and do not do with the board. We read a few of the ones that seemed most important and then proceeded to finish setting up the board for use. Now this is a warning I extend to whomever is reading this. No matter what you believe, there is something out there, and if you are not careful, there can and will be consequences. So please be careful and do your research before doing anything unusual or has to do with the paranormal. Now, after a bit of going over some of the rules and reading the instructions on how to begin use with the board, we all began by placing our fingers on the planchette and, looking at each other nervously. Jack kept pleading to just go play some more Madden, but Sam kept insisting he stayed just for a few minutes to see what happened. He agreed seemed to be getting more nervous after every second that went by. We designated Sam as the medium, or the person who asks the question. So he began by asking, are there any spirits in the room that would like to come and speak to us? Please communicate by using the board only. We waited a few minutes before he asked again. We waited. Nothing happened. After a few more unsuccessful attempts at contacting a spirit and around 30 minutes of waiting, still nothing was happening, and even Jack was becoming a little restless. Eventually Sam got tired of nothing, so he shouted out, is there anything that would like to speak with us? This time, after a couple of minutes, the planchette started to slowly move towards yes. It was almost as if the planchette was going at a slow crawl towards the yes, as it took almost 45 seconds for this to happen. Sam had a huge grin on his face as this was all happening, and you could sense the unease in Jack as his eyes seemed to be popping out of his eye sockets as he stared in disbelief at the board. I looked up at Sam and asked if he was moving it, and he said no. Then I asked Jack, and he muttered a simple no under his breath, still in shock at what was happening. After a minute of asking who was moving it, Sam decided to ask another question. This time he asked, can you tell us your name? Again, after a few seconds, the planchette slowly moved to the letter T, then to the H, then to then Z. This is your name? Sam asked, delighted at the thought of talking to a spirit. The planchette moved to yes and stopped. Jack Point seemed more amused than afraid of the board and whoever or whatever was talking with us. After a few more simple questions like are you male or female, and favorite food and animal and anything a 10-year-old can think of was asked, Sam asked, are you a good or evil spirit? After a few seconds, the planchette started to move towards no and stopped. We all looked at each other with a shared, easy feeling in our eyes. No, I asked quickly. The planchette then moved to yes. Again we all looked at each other with unease as Sam then asked, what do you mean no? The planchette then slowly spelled out the words no spirit. Jack at this point stared at the board, slowly starting to freak out and begging Sam to let him leave. But Sam told Jack to man up and made him continue to play. Sam then asked, if you are not a spirit, then what are you? The planchette started to move towards the letter D, then stop for a minute. We all looked at each other again, but this time with confusion showing on our faces. Just as we were about to ask what he meant by D, the planchette then continued to spell out the word demon. Jack immediately took his hands off the planchette and ran into the kitchen, starting to slowly sob. Not thinking about the board or this, we ran after him, following him into the kitchen to try to calm him down. Not hearing rule number 20 for stating never leave the planchette on the board. If you are not utilizing it, we stayed in the kitchen for around 20 minutes begging Jack to come back and play with us. and finish he game, or at least end it, eventually moving back into the living room where the board was. The first thing we noticed was the planchette was halfway off the board and on the floor. Sam quickly ran over realizing it and remembering Rule 8 that if the planchette falls from the board, a soul will get released. Of course, Sam didn't tell us and just asked us if we could end the game. We all agreed and quickly asked if we could say goodbye, and the planchette moved on to no. After a few more times of asking, we eventually forced the planchette to goodbye, and we left the board on the ground, and we all went to the couch and talked about what we had just experienced for around an hour before finally calming down. It was around 4 a.m. by the time we all decided it had been a long night and it was time to head to bed. I woke up in a sweat around 6 a.m. and woke Sam and Jack and told them I had a dream about a small 8-year-old boy that was running back and forth for what felt like hours. They told me it was just a weird dream and I should just go back to bed as we were all still really tired. We all woke up at around noon to the sound of a loud banging noise and realized it was my dad knocking on the door to unlock it and let him in. We didn't speak about this experience again, but we put the Ouija board away in the box and put it in a corner in the attic since no one ever went up there, and it was full of old boxes and spider webs and nasty things. The next week went by and nothing seemed to be happening out of the ordinary, and there was no more weird dreams. But the NEXT weekend on a Saturday I was left home alone for the night and decided to stay up and play video games. After a few hours I got bored and decided to head to bed as it was around 1 a.m. I quickly dozed off and slept for about 2 hours before waking up to the sound of someone running. It was faint, and me being tired just assumed the TV in the living room was on and fell back asleep. It didn't last long as I was quickly awakened by more running, which sounded like it was coming from right above me. It sounded like someone was in the attic and was running back and forth across it. I ended up going into the living room and sitting for around 15 minutes listening to this before eventually calling Sam to tell him what was going on. But for some reason the house phone wasn't getting a tone, and me being 10 didn't have my own cell phone yet. I decided I would just put in headphones and try and ignore it and fall asleep on the couch till my dad got home. I slowly drifted off into sleep till around 9 a.m. when I woke to the door closing and my dad arriving home. I never ended up telling Sam or Jack or even my dad what I had heard that night, but everything seemed fine for about an other week, and I just assumed it was a rat or some sort of animal running in the attic, or maybe even the wind, anything rational to help me sleep at night. About 2 weeks after that night, something I'm still unable to rationally explain happened. It was around 11 p.m., and my dad and I were getting ready for bed. I was in the shower washing up, and my dad was in the living room. As I am getting out of the shower and heading to my room, my dad asks me if I smell smoke. I took a few sniffs and realized it smelled like something was burning. I told him this, and he started to look in the basement and kitchen and everywhere while I got dressed. After I came out of my room clothed and confused, he told me to help him move a dresser under the attic entrance. I did, and he asked me to okay, if there was a fire in the attic, I climbed up on top of this dresser, which was almost as tall as me already, and then opened up the slab of ceiling that led into the dark room of an attic. I poked my head in and realized the smell was much greater, and then started to look around as my sight crossed the corner of the attic which we had hid the board, and only 3 weeks earlier I noticed it seemed to be darker than the rest of the corners. I realized the more I looked that the corner the easier it was to see into it, and I swear for just a second I seen a small kid, no tall, then 5 foot appear and give me a huge grin before the Ouija board which he was standing on burst into flames and started to engulf that corner of the attic. I shouted for my dad and told him the house was on fire and we needed to leave, which we did, and then we called the fire department, who came and put out the fire only after it had burnt away the side of the house and part of the roof. After we was allowed to return to the house to receive our belongings, I went to the attic and looked at the corner. Seeing that the Ouija board didn't have a single burn mark on it, I decided to do what any normal 10-year-old would do, and I threw it away and hoped it would never have to see it again. This experience has changed my entire outlook on the paranormal, and that anything that can be rationally explained may not be rational at all. Story 7. Nobody saw it coming. Dead leaves crunch underneath, noises of crickets joining in to create a small melody for my walk back. The air, while cool, is yet dry tonight, no wind in the trees. The fenced neighborhood dark, lonely, and quiet, though that being due to the late hour, my feet carry me to the familiar home, the place I know inside and out like the back of my hand. What time is it? The thought sinks into my mind, eyes weighing heavily, specifically from the long days of working. Or was it weeks? So much work, all-important work that means life or death to me. Sleep means nothing to me. It just gets in the way. I go on until the point where I might collapse. I've never learned my own limit. Only at a few times I give heed to rest and find somewhere safe to sleep wherever I am. A few hours always make do until the deadline ends. Then I can finally rest again. I slip past the side gate of the residence in front of me, careful to not push it past 3/4 of the way, or it'll make a horrible racket. The last thing I want is noise, one huge noise that would awake any sleeping soul around. That would just be another nuisance. I don't need more eyes on me. Well, not more than the eyes that already have been looming on me since the beginning, watching my every move, staring, stalking. I approach the backside with that feeling of still being watched. I'd rather use this door where no one can spot me. Safer, less intruding people to catch me from. Here, yet, with hesitation, I still have to. No need to look around and check the surrounding around me again, withholding my breath. My eyes scanning the darkness for anything. That feeling hasty lines looming over me, crushing its weight on me. I turn my attention back to the door, new locks and new code. No one can get into this place now without the knowledge of both. I took a deep breath, starting to fiddle with the lock. It jammed quickly on me. Great. A low growl slips past my lips, focusing more on this stubborn lock. A defect, but a welcoming challenge. My teeth grit, my growing focus distracting me between that paranoia of being watched, this damn, stupid lock. I could feel it growing, those eyes in such an intense stare, the image of a prey being cornered by its predator, just ready to attack and sink into the most vulnerable parts of me. Feeling my heart started to race, I push it all into one final rough shove. Not short after, I am greeted by the heavenly click of it giving way to me. Yes, I slip inside quickly, shutting the door behind me, making sure to lock it back up before moving to the alarm system and placing in the monotonous long code I had learned by heart. I scanned the dark room, then glanced back to the door once more. I keep my gaze fixed onto the door, going through a deep string of thoughts. I stand there, my breathing being the only noise heard. My mind goes from trivial things as the door lock, then to the situations leading up to the reason of getting those new locks on the door. And it came to me, all the sounds around the place, the shift of things either being placed into a new location or going missing completely. The sudden broken coffee mug in the middle of the floor, that constant sound, I could hear it, clearly echoing, taunting me. Was it all in my head? Drip, drip, drip. It was driving me nuts. Waking to the sound or coming by, CK inside from a long day away, always the same sound. Drip, drip, drip. Even thinking of it now makes my blood boil. My heart pound and fall down into my chest with an agonizing pain. I try to shake myself free out of my trance, inhaling quickly. That stopped as soon as security was changed. I gave a nod to myself, my mind reaching the conclusion that, with a bit of grease the lock it'll give way without the frustration. No need to even bother with the turning on the lights. The basement couldn't be too hard to find. I followed my path down the stairs, letting the sounds of my exhausted steps echo loudly on the staircase. A few creak under my weight. Always on the 6th and 10th step, the door moved without any impedance. The icy chill of the room hit me. Following with the musty smell reaching my nostrils, I stop, unable to recall where I left off, what I was looking for in here. I grumbled as I made my way around the room slowly, the solitary window giving the room a beautiful but unsettling glow from the moon. The light cast an odd and distorting shadows on the hard, rough stone walls. As I keep searching about, my frustration started growing over the amount of useless, annoying things gathering dust in this Sumerian basement. In the midst of it, I caught a sound. The farther into the end of the room I got, the clearer it became. That sound again, I froze in place, feeling my eyes widen, vision fading into a limited field, as if in a hypnotic trance. I listened to the rhythmic sound, the soft thuds. 1, 2, 3, 4, I whisper under my breath, counting the second that pass by. With each sound, I'm not longer really focusing on my actions, making my way closer to the sound, as if an invisible force urges me to Oh, there, my body moves in front of a leaking pipe, the water softly dripping out its weak point, clearly cracked open with rusting over time. I continued to stand there and just stare with econs passing. My mood switched from an unsettling calm to an aggravated state. My eyes gazed down on the leaking pipe with anger. A curse leaves my lips. There is enough at the moment to deal with. I don't have time for this stupid mess. I grab a tool hanging from my belt. Lifting it high into the air, ready to fix this pipe. Then I hear it, a scuffling sound. I freeze in place, listening closely. The longer the silence fills the room, the louder the scuffles seem to get, and the more damning each drip of water feels. the nose as if it is going to alert the thing. To this location, drip, 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 I held my breath. The rhythmic drips only seemed to get louder. I could hear the nose getting closer, moving above me. I believed to hear something fumbling outside. In the yard, maybe, but it was definitely coming. From up above, there was a whisper, a hushed voice speaking out, nearly muted by the sounds within the building. I hear it, a click, twist, turn, and with that they opened a door upstairs. They got in, they are in the house now. My thoughts raced on the possible outcomes. Was this person here to steal? My thoughts twisted up in my head, my panic turning into anger. No, they are here to cause great harm, great pain. With the tool tightly in my hand, I moved down. Moving quietly towards the door, I held my breath, listening to where exactly this person could be located. I could feel my pulse beating against this tool. Long, heavy, and metallic tool. The living room, there they were. I started to sneer. Up, avoiding the 10th step, then the 6th that had scared me alerted earlier. I gripped the tool in my hand once more, adjusting my grip on it. At that moment, I knew I was about to do this person more harm than what they were thinking to do onto me. My teeth grit together, breathing slowing so to become barely audible, my back pressing softly onto the wall. I pondered quickly, guessing the possible forms of attack. I heard them, messing with something metallic, not a gun, possibly a weapon such as my own. A crowbar, a bat, doesn't matter. I needed to listen carefully and attack them before they can get to me at all. My knuckles ached with the pressure. So eagerly, I wished to peek out to see exactly where they were holding up, to size them up, then take them down. But it was too risky. I could hear my heart pound faster, flooding my head. I waited with bated breath, a step here, a step there. This person's breath laboring, still unaware and I know they are here. That sound of metal moving and ringing, their voice was silenced, their steps slowly walking towards me. I felt my eyes widen once again, the tool in a death grip, ready to swing with all my might. Tap, tap, tap. Then silence. I can hear them breathing, words whispering under their breath. This is definitely a man's voice. He is messing with something, speaking to himself. I was about to almost sprint into action, but no, I had to keep the upper hand. Tap, tap, tap. He drew closer and closer. A few more steps, and I saw the blur of motion. I quick, swung, a sickening crunch following as my tool made contact. In the merest moment, I could see the shock in his tired, dull eyes, his greasy hair moving to the tool's groove. No control, I can't stop myself. One hit just isn't enough. I swung again and again. He hit the ground. I couldn't stop. I kept slamming the tool down in a frenzy, the same way someone kills a bug for disturbing my why. The eyes stared down at the scrawny man before me, the metal object under his hand shaking against the tile floor where it fell with him. His greasy, dark hair slowly soaking in the liquid, his other hand pale now and bearing the scars of one's labors and reaching out for something in his final moments. My breath heaved. Logic and rationality returning back into my mind, I stepped away, the warmth of the liquid slowly cooling on me. I shook my head, made a quick beeline for the bathroom, and flicked on the light. My tool was set down, the rusting pipe echoing a loud T-H-U-D on the countertop, liquid dripping off the ends of the pipe. My cold reflection stared back at me in the mirror glass. The faucet was turned on quickly, going to work on washing the blood off me. Hands, my upper face, the dark cloth covering my mouth, doing its job in shielding the rest of my face from messy situations. I could smell the iron lingering around my nostrils, almost making me sick. I leaned down close to the sink, letting the whole situation sink in deep. My eyes moved up, removing the mess of black hair out of my face. That black, unkempt, greasy, long hair I stare at, my reflection for what feels like hours, the mixed color of dead eyes of green and ice cold blue staring at the prominent scar upon my forehead, the one that bared a grim reminder and awful memories. I rasped a towel, wiping away the water and any remain. Blood on my skin. Too bad my gray shirt held on to stain a lot easier than the rest of my black clothing. Then I might have been able to forget about it by now. Sighing, my fingers thoroughly brought out a trinket from my vest pocket, staring down the gem hiding safely within the fabric. This trinket seemed to talk to me. It always had. Nah. Then, over and over I heard it call out for me. Maybe it was just my mind playing a trick on me, but that undeniable whisper remained. I slipped back into deep, empty thoughts once more before I realized I had been staring at the gem this entire time. Placing the purple gemmed trinket back into the safety of the pocket, I thought of the possibility of losing it. I would die to keep that trinket as safe. I turned my heel from the mirror, moving back into the hall once more. The body caught my attention once more, the phone shaking more against the ground. I moved in close, staring at it without a single emotion on my face. Without hesitation, I stomped down with my worn boot, breaking it into several pieces. Drip, dot, 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 drip, drip. The crimson liquid had already covered the tiles. Feeling no remorse about my actions, I no longer had the desire to stay put inside. After all, at this location, there would always be the feeling of us being watched by those arrows. On this neighborhood of bars, I chuckle, a smile tugging at my lips as I moved away from the mess I had caused. Besides, this isn't my home.